Hello and welcome to another episode of the Uncommon Energy Podcast. Plenty for us to talk about on this week's episode. We're going to kick off the episode by talking about the world's qualification information, which was released at the end of last week. Pokemon has finally said how many championship points are needed to get to the World Championships in Yokohama, Japan, and what players' paths may look like in order to get there. How do you earn these points? We'll talk about all of that. There were three major tournaments in the Astral Radiance / Pokemon Go format this weekend. The Baltimore Regional Championships, Porto Alegre, and Bilbao all taking place. We'll be talking about those results, what decks won, what were some unique things, and kind of putting a little bit of a bookmark on this format. Then we'll, of course, have Guess That flavor text. It is my turn to pick a card for Azul. We'll see if I can stump him. And then we've got some issues to talk about with the Baltimore Regional Championships. Lots of drama, lots of things happening this week. Coming off of a top 16 finish, though, I am joined, as always, by my co-host, Azul GG. My name is Trainer Chip Ritchie. Azul, top 16 with the Mewtwo v Union this weekend. How you feeling, man? How you doing?
Yep, doing pretty good. I guess one more thing that I'll mention that we won't be talking about is there was some tournaments in the Lost Origins format this weekend, but
Yes.
we're gonna save those
It's
for
Lost
next
Origin,
week.
Azul. Don't forget, Lost
Lost Origin,
Origin.
Lost Origin format, but we're talking about those next week.
Yeah.
Also with like a preview of Peoria Regionals with the whole Lost Origin format thing happening in Peoria in 2 weekends. So yes, we know they happened. Not gonna talk about them this week. We'll talk about them next week. But yeah, I was competing at Baltimore Regionals, ended up top 16. Did play the Mewtwo v Union. I did get on stream for a pretty crazy match up against an Arceus Duraludon, uh, where I threw initially. I could have just like, so I was like in my head. I knew they played the ordinary route because I saw it in the
Okay.
mulligan. So
That
I
was
was like,
definitely
when I
the
saw,
big deal right there in that
yeah, to
matchup, right?
know, yeah, and it's a bigger deal as well because you also don't know if they played training court or not until you see
Sure.
the ordinary rod, and that usually means they don't play training court. But early on in the game, I got 3 fightings in the discard pile, and they were kind of sitting there draw passing to find the rod, and I was focused on just recovering crushing hammers. But I think I could have just KO'd the Arceus right then and just KO'd it for 300 damage. I would have put myself in a spot where if they did play training court and decided to dig for it, because they definitely had a draw supporter in their hand, I would have just lost. Or if they top decked the ordinary rod and then played it and then played a Marnie out of hand, because I used Sydney like the turn prior, so I know they had a Marty in the hand, then I also would have lost. So I could have just gone that route, and then after that, I could have healed. And then if they still didn't have an attack off, then I could have just like 2-hit KO'd the Arceus after, or the Duraludon after that. So I could have won it a little bit sooner. Still got the win in the end, but it was a lot more intense and nerve wracking for that. But yeah, ended up top 16. Not the placement I was really hoping for. I felt like I was in a really good spot to get top 8 with how the meta for the tournament looked. It's kind of what we predicted. And then also how I had a good start. I went 7-1-1 in day one. My only loss was to Caleb playing the exact same 60. So he went in at 801 into day two with me. And then the only thing from there, the only other deck I lost to was I lost to Drew's Reggie. That's what put me out of top 8 contention. And that was tough. He had techs. He had all the techs. He had Scrapper, Bad Drago, Bad Lecky, Two
Yeah.
Path.
Yeah.
Like, you can't beat everything. You can barely even beat Paths of the Peak with our build. So that was rough. That was rough. Lost to Drew. That put me out. And then besides those 2 losses, I had 3 or 4 ties, and they were all to Mew players who won the first game. And when they get that early first win, like all you can hope for is really to tie at that point. So
Yeah.
ended top 16. Really happy with the deck choice. Really happy with the list. The path worked great. We all beat Empoleons, I think, throughout the day, and all beat and tied a lot of Mews, which is the bigger matchup for the card. We're like, all right, this is really good against Mew. Mew's going to be really popular, and we can beat Empoleon. So we all hit a couple Empoleons. I think I hit 1, but I think everyone else hit 1 or 2. So it helped for that as well. And yeah, overall, I'm like, as long as I get like felt like I got close to top 8, that's when I'm like, okay, this was like, I feel like I had put enough effort into the tournament, and it's like an okay result. Like, as long as I felt like I got close to top 8, I wasn't on my winning in or anything at any point for top 8, but I felt like deck choice, the list, and like how I played throughout the tournament put me in a good spot to potentially get top 8. So definitely content with the top 16 finish overall. But
Yeah,
how
well,
was casting ship? Go
casting
ahead.
was great. Yeah, that is right. I was a caster for the event. We didn't get to like talk about it much last week because it had not been officially announced by
Yep.
Pokemon yet at that point. But yes, indeed, I was there. I was in Baltimore casting the tournament. It was an absolute blast. Thanks again, as always, to Pokemon for having me out. I love the opportunities to get to do that, and thank you so much to our listeners, to so many people who came up to me, and I'm sure the same is for you as
Yeah.
well, Azul, came up to me and thanking me for the podcast and for the content we are creating. And so, yeah, we're really appreciative of that. I actually had something that was really cool for me was a guy came up to me and said that he started playing just a few months ago after finding the podcast. He found the podcast, didn't have any clue who you were, had no clue who I was, just found the podcast, got into Pokemon. He lived in Baltimore and it was like, you know what? I'm going to the Baltimore Regional Championships. I think that is pretty sweet. So shout outs to JC. Thanks for coming up and saying what's up, man. I think Azul, you said you spoke to him as well.
Yeah, I met them as well. That was super cool. Super cool to see. Yeah, huge shout out to everyone who came up to me. Just said what's up, signature, or just wanted to get say what's up and get one of the few remaining dice that I had, the uncommon energy dice. Unfortunately, all out of dice now, but we might look to do some more in the future. But yeah, huge shout out to you guys for all the support in tuning into the episodes, but then showing the support at the events as well. Make sure to come up, say what's up for whatever reason you just want to say hi, a handshake, a picture, a signature, whatever it is. Be sure to come up and say what's up when you see me or Chip at the event. We very much enjoy that. You're not bothering us. We always have time for people who enjoy the content we make here for sure.
100%. Well, Azul, let's go ahead and hop into the meat of things this week. And there's definitely plenty to talk about. In addition to all the results, of course, we're going to start this week by talking about Pokemon finally releasing the information on how people need to qualify for the World Championships. Of course, this year's World Championships in 2023 are taking place in Yokohama, Japan, which I think has a ton of players extremely excited about until maybe they saw this qualification information, because I think people were hoping for a little bit of a mix up, but it turns out that I mean, at least for NA, it is the same. And I think it's pretty much the same for most other regions as far as how many points are required. So for anyone who doesn't know exactly how this works, Azul, do you want to fill people in on like the championship point process, how people earn points, and how that adds up towards getting their World's Invite?
Yeah, so there's the number of points you need to get for Worlds Invite, and that varies between your division and your region. So for North America, if you're a junior, you need 350 championship points. If you're a senior, you need 400. If you're a master, you need 500. But then if you go over to Europe for a junior, you only need 250 points. A senior only needs 250 as well, and the masters only need 350. So depending on your region, you will need more or less points. And that's just kind of to do with how many events those areas have, especially for like the major events. North America has the most by far major events in the world. I think the only one that comes close is actually I think it's Europe or Latin America actually have more. It's definitely Europe though, right? Has the more regionals.
I
Second
don't
most regionals.
know. Latin America has definitely started to have a lot more regionals. And also,
They
whenever
have,
you
yeah,
get into the mix of like special events and stuff, both of those regions have a decent amount of special events as well.
yeah,
So it's probably honestly pretty close, but it makes sense because, like, I'd say they're both pretty similarly sized regions. Europe probably being a little bit bigger, so it probably does still get the edge a little bit as far as how many events it gets. And when I say bigger, I mean player base wise most of the
yeah.
time. But there is definitely, I mean, there has been a huge boom I've noticed over the last couple of years just in the Latin America region of more and more events and a ton of players. They're getting a lot of players at these tournaments too.
Yeah, and there's only been one Latin America regionals announced so far. They'll definitely have more, so we don't
Yeah.
quite know how many they're going to have. But yeah, that's how many points you need to qualify for the World Championships. And the way you get points is by placing in official sanctioned tournaments. Now, in the past, we've had League Cups and League Challenges, which are like local events. Smaller one being the League Challenges, where you get like 15 points for winning, and then League Cups you get like 50 points for winning, and then you go up to the Regional Championships, where you get 200 points for winning, and that's what was just happened this past weekend was the Baltimore Regional Championships. So if you won a regional championship or a special events also give away 200 points, but the prizing is not the same. There's the pricing for special events is basically just booster boxes. There's no cash pricing, but you do get the same amount of points. And special events are basically to try and help areas or regions that just don't have as many regional, because the regional tournaments are kind of supported through Pokemon. Like as far as we know, as far as I know, like Pokemon sends or gives out the money to the winners of the regionals and so on, right? Or if you place at a regional, you get the money from Pokemon. But they only sponsor so many regionals, so they give the opportunity for TOs to run special events in some situations, and
And I
that happens a
think
lot in Europe. I think the most.
And I think special events as well will occur in places where there are weird, like gambling slash gaming laws, where if you put money on the line, if people are paying money to try to win money, that can be seen as gambling in some senses, especially when it comes to like the randomness of a card game potentially.
Yeah.
So I think that has something to do with it as well. But yeah, pretty much just special events, regionals, same thing as far as the championship points are concerned. And the points
Yeah.
are the vital piece. That's what you need, to get a bunch of to play in a bunch of tournaments, get your championship points, and try to stack them up, accrue them until you hit whatever qualification number you need. Now, I would say our most heavily serviced demographic from the podcast is definitely masters in the US and Canada, though we
Yeah.
do have listeners worldwide. So many of our listeners, if you're wanting to qualify for Worlds, you're going to need the 500 championship points, which is the same as it has been the last couple of years, I think, at least in 2019 to the
Yeah.
2022 season, since everything got kind of weird, right?
Were we at
Um,
550? Like before that, there was
yeah.
one year where it was 550, right?
There
Yeah.
was, but I think that was the year it got dropped down.
Okay,
I
so
think
they
it was
brought down to 450,
550 in
right?
2017. So there was and this is part of what I wanted to talk about as well, because people are very worked up and upset about the fact that um, basically you have to get 500 points, which is the same as what we've had to get before, but there's no league cups and challenges for
Yeah.
half the year. And it definitely is a big deal, and it makes it more difficult to get an invite. It was already pretty difficult to get 500 points in the US and Canada. Like getting a World's invite, really in any region, is not easy by any means. But I think just naturally, the area where you have to get the most points is going to make it a little bit more difficult. Though the reason for that is we do have more events than any
Yeah.
other place in the country, though they are spread out across our pretty large country land size. But anyway,
Yeah.
um, people are, I think, maybe rightfully so, upset that it is um, a little bit more difficult to qualify this year. But what I'll say to people is there is precedent for them changing this information partway through the season. So in 2017, they made the bar to qualify for Worlds pretty tough. It was 550 points for the North America region. I don't remember how much it was for the rest of the world, but basically we got to like January slash February, and it became pretty evident that not a lot of people were going to qualify. And
Yeah.
so Pokemon retroactively dropped the CP bar and also boosted the CP that you had earned from events previously. So
Yeah.
normally League Cups gave 50 points, and I'm pretty sure if I remember correctly that season they bumped it to 55 points. So added 5 more points in there. And they did the same thing like across the board. Regionals wins, instead of 200, I think it was like 220 or something like that. Like they just
Yeah.
bumped everything up
A little
10% or
bit.
so to try to compensate for the fact that so few people had Worlds invites. So to me, this means like in TPCI's head, they kind of have an idea of how many people ish they want to qualify for Worlds from each region. And so there is precedent that if they feel like partway through the season they're not at that mark, they could change it up, right?
Yeah, but I feel like that's such a bad system. We should just know
I agree.
beforehand. And okay, and like, sure, maybe if this was, but like, even in the argument that maybe they're doing a new system so they want to try it out, and then that would cause that. That's what we had initially when they went to the 550. But we've had 3 years in a row now of the same system, right? Or 3 full seasons in a row of the same system, or roughly maybe 2.5, I guess, because COVID kind of cut things short, right? So we had
Sure.
the 550 year, the 500 year, and then there was another 500 year that COVID cut short. But that should be enough data for them to just pick a number and sit with it. And what I was going to say to that, maybe this is the number they want, though. Maybe they want it to be as hard as it will be at 500. Now, I'm a pretty big fan of the idea of the regionals or the world's invite not being actually too hard to obtain, because it really is. And you've mentioned this many times. It's the only thing to play for in Pokemon, really, on a competitive level. I think we're starting to see. I think GLC is actually a big reason of this. A more casual like reason to play the game, I guess, right? Like I feel like GLC is doing a big thing with that, which is really cool to see. Just more people wanting to play Pokemon to kind of play Pokemon. But at the end of the day, even if you're not a truly like diehard competitor, just competing on some level is nice, and giving yourself the chance to get a Worlds invite, even if you don't make it that year, but giving like a little bit more reason to show up to the League Cups and the League Challenges, or maybe go to that one extra regional. The events are so much more than just trying to compete for your Worlds invite. You show up, you have fun, you play Pokemon, you play with your friends. Um, So I feel like Worlds Invites really shouldn't be too difficult to get personally. I know it is the World Championship, but Pokemon is a hobby at the end of the day, and it's a competitive hobby. So you want to make it. You want someone who works a full time job, but who can make some time on the weekend to go to some events and maybe a couple of regionals to have a fighting chance to get their Worlds invite. Right? I feel like that should be obtainable. To go along with that, one thing I will say is I think they should increase the number of players who make it to day two through the day two invite system. For those who don't know, a certain number of players each year from each region make it to automatically the second day of the world's competition. That's top 16 from US and Canada, top 22 from Europe, top 12 now. We should talk about this as well. Top
Yes.
12 now from Latin America. It was 8 before. From 8 to
Very good
4.
for Latin America.
Yeah.
Very
I
good, and
think they
definitely something that they needed
yeah,
and deserved.
I think they should just have 16.
Sure.
Um Oceana, so Oceana was cut down from 8 to 4. Now, I think if you maybe like looked at the number, like you're going into Pokemon and you're like, okay, here are the numbers for how many players play in these regions. Okay, this is how many day two invites each of these regions should get. That would be fine. I think cutting their invites back is just really stupid. Like, sure, maybe you increase everyone else's day two invites, but you don't increase Oceania. I think that would be reasonable based on how many players are in the Oceania region, but I don't think they should have cut it back. And then before you want to make your comments on it, the last thing I'll mention, they added two new day two invites to a new region, the Middle East slash South Africa rating zone, which is super sick. Getting more regions involved with day two invites is super sick. I have no clue how many players are over in those regions, but seeing that means there's enough that they're giving them day two invites, which is super cool to see. But I think there should be more, and I think them cutting back on Oceanas was bad.
Yeah, I do think there's been a couple of competitors from the Middle East and South Africa the last couple of world championships. A very good thing for those players to see that they're getting recognized, getting a shot to have a chance to earn their day two invitation. Also worth noting as well, as far as day two invitations go, there are several regions that are excluded because the way their competitive season works is a little bit different than the rest of the world. So, players in Japan, South Korea, and Asia Pacific will be awarded both Friday invitations and day two invitations as determined by each region's organized play system. So, that is separate from Play Pokemon, what we have here in the western part of the world. Players in the Russia rating zone are not eligible for day two invitations. I do believe we have had Russian competitors, though, the last few years. And then maybe not this past season, though. I don't remember for sure. And then players in South Africa are not eligible for travel awards. So you can get a day two invitation, but you can't get a travel award, which is a little interesting. But yeah, I will make a comment on the Oceania rating zone thing. So I think probably where this is coming from is at the start of the 2019 to 2020 season, the Asia Pacific countries were removed from the Oceania rating zone. They're no longer part of the play Pokemon structure where they had been previously. Those players were all included in just kind of that whole,
Yeah.
southeastern part of the world rating zone for world invite structures, right? That a ton of players were removed from that, and they now have their own system in place. Asia Pacific will be awarded both Friday and day two invitations as determined by each region's organized play system. They have their own organized play system, and they actually had their first regionals this weekend. Once again, we will be talking about that next
Okay.
week's episode.
Okay.
But
I actually didn't know that.
yeah,
But maybe I didn't know that because the Oceania top 8 was just dominated by Australian players,
it
which
usually was. There was always a handful of players from these other countries that were kind of in there and would travel to the other
yeah.
would travel to Australia for their regionals and stuff like that. Um, so I
Maybe
think
that
that's
maybe that is fair
probably
then.
where that is coming from, and it does make me lean a little bit more towards it making sense, but at the same time, it does feel unfair to the players. Um, because and Oceania is the smallest of the four major rating zones. Now, obviously, we have kind of this fifth one with the Middle
Yeah.
East and South Africa being thrown in here, which would be a little bit smaller. Oceania previously has always been the smallest, just player base wise, but there are some excellent, excellent players in that region. I mean, we've seen it at
Oh
the
yeah.
international level. Kaiwin getting top 8 at Worlds, and then also getting ninth place at in AIC. Natalie Miller has impacted the meta incredibly the last season. So, I mean, these players really do play a big role and are some of the best players in the world. so it makes me feel a little bummed that there will be less spots awarded, and just that alone makes me want there to be 8 spots awarded.
Yeah.
Because traveling out of Australia to other parts of the world to the internationals, and then maybe not as bad to Japan actually, because it is probably the closest of all the regions to getting to Japan, but they had definitely have the hardest time getting out of there. So I mean, outside of these top 4 players, it makes me question how many Worlds players we'll actually see from Australia and New Zealand.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think like you don't even have to give like one of the things that is tied into generally getting these top spots at the end of the year by having just the most championship points. So that's how you get the spots is like you are just the top 16 players in North
Yeah.
America or not North America, US and Canada. It does not include Mexico.
Yeah,
Um,
Mexico's included with Latin America.
yeah, if you're the people with the most championship points at the end of the year, you also get a travel award, right? That's a pretty big deal. But I would like personally, like if I could change this, I would like to see. I don't know how much you would do for Europe because it's so weird that they have 22 to begin with. But if you could do like 32 US and Canada, 32 to 40 for Europe, 16 for Latin America. Maybe Oceania does stay at 4, but let's say they go to 8, and then you keep the 2 now for Middle East and South Africa, and just half of them get the travel award and the other half just get the day 2 invite. So if you took 32 from US and Canada, the top 16 get a travel award plus day 2 invite, and then the other 16 under that, they just get the day 2 invite. I
And
just feel
that's
like
kind of
there
what we
should
saw
be
this
more.
season, right? That's what they ended up doing this
Yeah,
season,
yeah.
because we had kind of the mess of everything with COVID and like messing up the. We had the 2 weird half seasons kind of mashed together into the
I kind of
2019
forgot
through
that's what they did.
2022 season, right? Like definitely a little bit of a mess.
So
Um,
they doubled the day 2 invites for this last Worlds
yeah,
in London because of the way everything was so weird. So we had actually that exact system. I completely like that just like went over my head right there to be honest. But yeah, I think there just should be more day 2 invites. I think there's enough players that want to compete from them, and it would give the opportunity for more players to have the chance to compete for the day 2 invite because I do feel like that the day 2 spots are pretty just kind of top heavy with who actually even attempts to compete for the day 2 invite. And sometimes at towards the end of the year, someone will go on a hot streak. They already have their invite, but they're gonna go to like 1 or 2 more regionals. They'll show up for the like NAIC at the end of the year, and if they do well at a couple of those things,
it's
they can
like
all of a
they'll
sudden be
win
in
one of the last
contention.
regionals and then
Yeah,
like be like,
do well at
okay, if I make
NAIC.
top 8 in NAIC, all of a sudden I'm in top 16, right?
Yeah, but they're kind of just like coming in at like 15th, 16th. They're never had like a chance to be
Yeah.
for, like to be more comfortably in a day 2 invite position. So I would just like to see it. I think there's enough players, and the game is getting big enough where the invite should be reasonable for someone who wants to treat the Pokemon TCG as a competitive hobby because that's what it is at the end of the day, right? A lot of people, I mean, need Pokemon isn't a full time job, so you need a full time job. Masters, there's 1,000. We had 1,000 players at this first regional of the season, right? Masters players by far dominate the game in terms of who's going to show up and play the game. And a lot of them are, in situations where they're like further along in life. It's not like just like 1,000 15-year-olds, right? Like
Yes.
there's like it's 18 to I don't know 30 plus is like a majority of the players there,
Yeah,
right? So
probably
people
mid
like
20s is the largest demographic. Like 22 to 27 is probably the
yeah,
largest
so
demographic, honestly.
full-time jobs, going to college, still in high school, whatever. No one can commit to going to as much events. So I think that as many events as they would like. So I think getting your Worlds invite shouldn't truly be that difficult. Obviously, you should have to put in some time, some effort, and place decently at some events, but it shouldn't be like a massive chore. I don't feel like
Also, you mentioned the
a real hard grind.
1,000 people for this first regionals, and let's not forget that it's sold out in 24 hours as well, right? Like,
Yeah, they did give some. They did open up some spots later on, I believe.
I think so
It
too.
did. It
Yes.
did continue to sell out, though. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah. So it ended up being at kind of what their capacity was for the event. But and speaking of the regionals as well, something else that got announced alongside the World Championship qualification bar was finally just confirmation of the regionals structure, the prize payout for championship points and for cash prizes. And it was what we were expecting, right? It is the same as it has been in the past, which makes it so much more frustrating that it wasn't just posted forever
Yeah.
ago, right? But,
Took forever for them to announce. Like, they announced it 2 days or the day before the event.
2
2 days.
days
Which one?
before the event.
Yeah, They announced it 2 days before the event. How much points you needed for your invite, how much you would win at the regionals, and how many points you would get for doing well at the regionals. Yeah, and it's the exact same as before. And it took them so long to announce it, and nothing changed. Like that just is ridiculous. So once again, No credit to Pokemon for getting announcements out there. It just took way too long to give us information we kind of already assumed we had, but it doesn't mean it's correct for them to withhold the information to this point, right? People want to know what they're playing for or what they are trying to play for, right? And to be honest, with like how much the game has grown and where it's going, and I know you feel this way, everything feels a little bit low, right?
It really does. These are the numbers that were set in 2016. And the world is a vastly different place 6 years later than it was in 2016. The 2016-2017 season being the first one where cash was added to the game. Now, I think that first season, the initial prize structure was terrible when it first came out. I don't know if you remember or not, but initially, when they first announced, okay, regional championships are going to get prize money. First place is going to win $5,000. Second place is going to win $2,500. Everyone else in the top 32 gets $250. Top
Oh, is
4,
that it?
top 16, top 32, whatever. You got $250.
Wait, actually, is that actually
Yes,
what it
that
was?
is
No
actually
way.
what it was. Yes. You don't remember this? And then it was a
No.
massive wave of support tickets from the community, headed up by our friend Michael Slutsky. How do you not remember this?
I
And
don't
everyone
remember it being 250 for top 8. I thought it was like maybe outside of top 8 it was low, but I thought
no, it
top 8
was a
was the
terrible breakdown. Everyone submitted
sheesh.
tickets.
Very top
It
heavy.
it was very top heavy. Maybe it was like 5,000 and 3,500 or something like that for first and
Mhm.
second, and then top 4 was $250. So the community submitted support tickets and things got changed, and they eventually made it so that top 30 that too similar to what this prize payout looks like now, but in addition to top 32 getting $250, top 64 also got $250. A little
Yeah.
nice little rebate, that helps pay for, a good chunk of travel. At that time, it really probably paid for most of your travel. Splitting a hotel, and then flights were a lot cheaper 6 years ago than they are now.
Yeah.
Um, but then in the 2018 season, 2017-2018 season, they took away the top 64 money, and then this is what the structure has been since 2018, 2017-2018 season. So no changes really, and stuff's gotten more expensive in life, man. It's more expensive to travel. Hotels are more expensive. The game has gotten a lot bigger. Cards are way more expensive than they once were. And Pokemon's been making more money than they've made.
And
So
fees have
it
gone
does
up.
feel pretty bad to look at all those factors and see, all right, we're still getting kind of the same thing as far as pricing goes.
Yeah, so it feels pretty bad. I definitely think they need to increase it. I don't know what they should increase it to. It feels weird if they were to give. You know what? They should they should just go to the full 10K because if you said they won like 7,500, that just looks like a bad number. You got to go to the full 10K for
It
sure. So
looks better, right?
yeah, so may as well just commit, right? 10K for first, 5K for second. But yeah, I definitely feel like prize payout needs to be increased. Um, in that just flat out for regionals, and I also think I don't even know where I don't know where it should be, right? I don't know what it should be. I do think there should be if you make day 2, you get prize money though. I think that should probably be a thing. Like pay it out to top maybe you guys should be paying out to top 128. You should at least be paying out to top 64, I guess. Maybe you could bring back the top
Yeah,
64
at least
payout.
top 64.
That way at least gives people something to play with too towards the end of the day and people aren't just like um IDing to stay out of like because we do get tournaments big enough where you're like IDing to stay in 128, right?
Yeah.
So now you can play for top 64, I guess, or something. So yeah, I don't know. They need to do that. They need top 64 should get money, and then they need to increase the prize money payout. I think overall, I don't know what it should be. I think it definitely should be more. Yeah, like you said, we've been doing this for now. We've been on the same prize structure for 5 years, and yeah, nothing's changed. And with that, the CP structure I think probably needs to change as well, right? Like there should be, and I actually don't think it should scale. It shouldn't be a constant, but I think it should scale with size of event, right? Like there should be some bump. Right now, there's bumps to increase the prize payout to more people, kind of backwards. Like first place is always 200 points,
Yes.
right? At the regionals, and then second place is always
160,
180,
60.
160. But I think once we hit a certain number, first place should be like maybe 1,000 people. Then first place should be 250, and then it should also bump down to increase other points for everyone who made 128. And then the other thing would be, I think if you make day 2, like if there's 100, if prize payout to 128, I don't know what it is. It's 30 points. Let's say it gets increased to 40 when we hit the 1,000 point mark. If you make day 2 and your player number 129 the 130, whatever, you should also get the same CP as anyone who made day two. There should be day two CP, and then for increments of placements up from that, you should get more CP.
What do you think is a more impressive accomplishment for a player, Azul? Making day two at 1,000 person regionals or winning a 20, 30 person league cup?
Day two at 1,000 person
I would
regionals.
agree with that. But 60 people who participated in Baltimore Regionals this weekend got, or sorry, who made day two at Baltimore Regionals this weekend got 40 championship points, which is 10 less points than you get for winning a league cup. And that just really, I totally agree with you. Is not how it should be. Um, they've got to, they do bump it based, how many they pay out, like you mentioned. If there's more players competing, it really does need to scale. And the prize money scales, right? Granted, the top level is for 201 plus players.
Yeah,
So this is
maybe
mostly
that should
going to
be
be
the
relevant for like the younger divisions and stuff. But
yeah. Maybe that should be the same thing as like we're talking about with CP with for prize money as well. If we hit, I don't know what numbers to say 1,000 again. If we hit 1,000 players, maybe the prize money doesn't double, but now it's 7,500 for first place, right? Just like another bump based on attendance. Like I think that would be reasonable, but I don't know. Maybe it should just be maybe. But I feel like once again they'll kind of think about because your travel factors don't change depending on how many players show up, right? You could argue the tournament's harder to win. Doesn't necessarily mean that the prize money should be because Worlds is probably harder than most regionals just because of the caliber of players, but there's less players, right? So, and a lot of these regionals, like especially in the Masters division, especially in North America, are getting extremely competitive. You have a lot of players coming from other countries. Tord was here. You have players coming from Latin American countries to show up and play. And these Gustavo regularly comes to North American
Pablo
regionals as
goes to like
well.
every single North American
Yep.
regionals.
Pablo, like these North American regionals are getting really really hard. And just because the player base is bigger, we have more seniors, and then all the good seniors age up, and it just like it come like we got Piper and
Reagan,
Travis last year.
yeah,
Reagan, we got Reagan
this
this
year.
year aged up. So like it just keeps getting so much and so much harder at these regionals. I definitely feel like we need some kind of CP increase. We need some kind of prize pool increase, whether that just be outright or I think that the prize money should just be outright. But if they at least gave us like, if you hit 1,000 players, we'll give you some more money. That would be something, right? I think
Yeah.
it needs to be something for sure. I think we're at that point, anyways.
One other thing we need to talk about, and then we need to move on to keep the cast rolling, is that whenever this information got released on Thursday, a
Oh
ton
yeah,
of information was wrong. So they updated the
and it's not even
regionals
the new
page.
information. It
No.
wasn't any of this. This was all fine and correct. Well, maybe it is wrong. Let's hope it's wrong. Actually, hopefully this stuff was also wrong and they haven't updated it yet. But
Yeah,
it was
maybe.
events. Some of them that were already announced, stuff was messed up.
Yes, events had wrong dates on them, had wrong locations on them. That
Titles.
was different from the original announcement. One of the examples was like the Milwaukee Regional Championships was changed to a Madison Regional Championships. In Europe, there was a tournament, the Warsaw tournament, which was originally a regionals, was changed to a special event. Now those things have been fixed and changed now, but one thing that is actually still not changed, which is wrong, and it is posted on the Pokemon website still right now when we're recording this episode, is that Toronto regionals, it says here, is November 4th to 6th, which is incorrect. So if you are listening to this and you are planning to go to Toronto regionals, it is not November 4th to 6th. It has been confirmed by the organizer. The tournament is taking place December 2nd through the 4th, which is what was originally announced.
Yeah, we're only 6 weeks away from that. It's not that I already booked my flight for Toronto, and I booked it 2 days before the announcement where they came out with the wrong date, and I was kind of pissed. I was like, "All right, so what's the right date? Should I try and cancel this flight, or what's going on here?" But we're 6 weeks away. It wouldn't be unreasonable for someone to look on the website right now and book a flight, right? Like tomorrow morning,
Yeah.
just like be like, "I'm going to Toronto Regionals. What are the dates?" And they look it up, and they're like, "Look at the place where they book their flights. This is a reasonable price for these dates. I'm going to book my flight, right?" And they book their flight. They don't get the trip insurance because no one does that, and then 24 hours passes and they can't cancel their flight anymore, and that would suck, right? So, yeah, it's just I don't even like want to say it. Like it's obviously sad and bad, but we just say this every week.
Unacceptable. Unacceptable. This information should be correct when it gets released. Now, obviously, things will change, but this is like a different situation from that. It's not like a tournament that's happening in several months, has a little bit of an update and gets moved to a different convention center in the same city. Like, that's a reasonable thing that could happen
Hmm.
theoretically at some point, right? And I think most people would be understanding that things like that could occur. This is something, like you said, like the beginning of November being 6 weeks away, it would be not unreasonable for someone to just stumble upon this, wants to go and be like, oh yeah, boom, book my flight, and
Yeah, and
they're
it's not like
they're just out of luck.
yeah, it's not like something happened that would cause them to no longer be able to run an event at a convention. This is someone has to go in there, open HTML or whatever, and just switch like a couple numbers or whatever on the website. Like it's like not hard to do, and it's been wrong now. It's still wrong. It's been wrong for days now, right?
Yes.
So hopefully we'll wake up tomorrow and it'll be fixed. But we'll have to wait and see.
Fingers crossed. We will have to wait and see though. But Azul, there were several tournaments this weekend. We already talked about Baltimore a little bit. You were a competitor. You got top 16. Congrats once again. But that was not all. Of course, there were the two tournaments taking place with Lost Origin cards legal, the Champions League in Japan, and then a tournament, I believe it was in Singapore, if I am
Yeah.
remembering correctly. Regionals over there. But there were three more tournaments that took place in the Pokemon Go format, Sword and Shield through Pokemon Go. So we had the Baltimore Regionals, Porto Alegre in Brazil, and Bilbao in Spain, a special event. All three events won by three different decks. And we'll start by talking about Baltimore. We were both there, which was won by Piper Lapine with her Radiant Charizard deck. Congratulations to Piper. I think she is someone, and I said this on the broadcast during the live stream. She is someone that everyone knew is like a really good player, and it's kind of someone who, uh, at the end of last year, she was in that weird spot where she was a senior in 2019, COVID happened, and then all of a sudden in 2022 events come back and she's having to play half a season as a master. And she had
Yeah.
really good finishes for someone in that situation. She got top 64 at internationals, top 32 at regional championships, which are all really impressive things. And I think everyone kind of recognized, okay, Piper's going to break into the top 8 at some point, most likely this season. It's like gonna happen. And then she ends up breaking in the top 8 and winning her first Masters top 8. Congratulations to Piper Lapine.
Yeah, yeah, congrats. And yeah, with the Radiant Zard, which is a deck I think we both mentioned, we were like, it's one of those decks where it's really good. We both respected it as like a tier one slash tier two deck. And if it won the tournament, like I mean, we wouldn't be surprised, right? And yeah, Piper took it down with the Radiant Zard. Yeah, the deck's really good. Yeah. And she played it super well, super well. I went back and actually like watched. I forget who made a comment. Someone made a comment on Twitter about how well she played it. So I was like, I just wanted to go back and watch her just like play with the deck. And yeah, that was it's pretty crazy. Um um Not too much else too ridiculous. I guess the other deck that we could talk about in top 8 from Baltimore was Jack Moore's more well, it's not a more Pico deck. It is a Miltank
It's more
deck.
Pecco, Azul, more Pecco.
Less there, but there was some less Pecco in the deck. There was a less Pecco in the deck. And it was just like kind of a weird control deck, right? Like, it was a Miltank deck. So you're obviously just trying to win with Miltank whenever you can. But then there was also more Pecco in there, Ditto, and a Reggie Lecky, I believe, right?
Yeah, and it's the bad Alecki, quote unquote
Yeah,
bad
bad
Alecki,
Lecky.
to just grab trainers back from the discard pile, put them into your hand. And I imagine that's probably mostly used in like situations where your opponent has run out of stuff and you're copying Ditto to, use more Pecco, and then you cycle in a Regieleki when you can type
Yeah.
thing,
Well, there's some
potentially.
Yveltals as well.
Yeah, for the
Um,
Mew matchups. But yeah, very cool deck. It really is definitely riding heavy on the back of Miltank, it feels
yeah.
like. And honestly, probably a reasonably good meta call for Jack because Arceus Intellion was not very popular, but Arceus Pikachu was, and that deck does not have a good answer to Miltank. Attacking with Bibarel is not going to do it. It might get you through one Miltank. It's not getting you through four, though.
Yeah. I mean, there is also like the Decidueye that most people played,
Oh, that's true. Yes.
um,
Yeah. I can't forget
but
that.
yeah, you can get the Decidueye set up, but there's Crushing Hammers, there's Yveltal to remove DTE potentially, and then the Morpeko, the deck doesn't play a ton of switch cards, and Decidueye is 2 retreat costs. So Morpeko comes up, punches the Decidueye. All right, you can't use that attack next turn. And then if they evolve it, you lose access to the attack to KO Miltanks. And if you retreat it, you lose 2 energy. It just gets kind of bad. So I'm sure you just sit there, set up Miltank, and hold your Crushing Hammers and kind of wait for the Decidueye to, show itself. And then you start kind of going after it pretty aggressively. So yeah, really cool deck. Unfortunately, probably not going to be very good next format. And I would have loved to like try this deck out and experiment with it, but with the new format already here, I'll probably never really truly learn what this deck was capable of because there's just with the Lost Zone decks being so good and having so many one prize attackers, I don't think Miltank is going to be quite as powerful, for sure. And I think the only other thing to really mention from Baltimore besides that would just be Mewtwo, DTE Mewtwo. Kind of, I guess, overall, if you looked at the
Mew.
tournament, kind of dominated
Mew V
DTE
Max.
Mew.
Yeah.
DTE Mew. No Fusion Strike Energy. DTE Mew kind of dominated the tournament, I think, overall. Jeremy was 9-0 going into day two. And then you had also
With 3 in top
Rudiger.
8.
Yeah, 3 in top 8 overall, Rudiger and Molaski as well alongside Jeremy. So, and overall, outside of, there was just a ton of it in the top tables going from day 1 to day 2, and then in day 2 in general. There's a lot of DTE Mew, a couple Fusion Strike Mews still, but the DTE Mew is everywhere.
Before we move on too far away from the Morpeko deck, there is one thing I want to comment on, just in case anyone is kind of curious. It is always really unfortunate. So just kind of like a little bit of a behind the scenes look on the functions and choices as to what goes into the stream. So the casters, we do, it is up to us to pick which matches go on stream. And we do generally just have a short amount of time to make that decision because we got to get to the table before the players get set up so we can get them to the stream, get things moving, and get things rolling as quickly as possible. So it's a quick decision process. So because of that, we are always out there in the field watching games, trying to find unique decks, unique techs, and we want to feature people whenever they come up with something unique. So Jack was a player who was very much on our radar as someone we wanted to try to feature on the live stream, but unfortunately it just didn't quite work out that way. So I wanted to bring this up because it was brought up on Twitter by Kevin Clementi, friend of ours, Mellow Magikarp, or as he would say, Mellow_Magikarp. How in the world did we let Miltank Morpeko make top 8 and it never got streamed, yet we were forced to watch 85 Mew matchups, including a mirror? And I did respond to this just because I wanted to give a little insight, and I don't want people to think that we were avoiding putting a control deck on stream because there's a little bit of that mentality out there. And I'm not going to say, like, we don't ever try to avoid it entirely, but we are mindful with how often decks like that get featured because it is a little different than how traditional Pokemon is meant to be played, like those type of decks. And for a lot of viewers, that becomes an uninteresting experience. So we talked about early in day one, when we saw that there was, your crew, Azul, playing the Mewtwo deck, it was like, okay, we're going to feature this deck at some point today, just because it is a deck that people love, people, like the idea of it, but it's kind of a repetitive and like once you see
Yeah.
it once and you understand what it does, it's not very exciting, right? I mean, even as you who played it, I think you would say that is fair, right?
Yeah. It
So
definitely
we
gets a little bit of training to heal 200 damage every single turn.
So between the handful of players who were playing it, and there were several of you guys that we were watching who were playing the deck, it was like, okay, we're going to put one of them on at some point in the day. We'll just wait until there's a good matchup. And it came up, you were playing against Arceus Duraludon. He had the Ordinary Rod. We're like, okay, this could have enough interesting scenarios, and we haven't had Arceus Duraludon on yet. This will work. Let's get these guys on. So that's why Azul's match got picked. I did want to say, and this is what my response to Mello was. We became aware of Jack's deck during day 2 in the early rounds. We didn't stream the first couple of rounds. We started with round 12, and we were excited. So I'll just read what I tweeted. We were excited about Jack's deck and did want the chance to feature it. Anytime someone comes up with something creative and does well, I think they deserve a shot in the spotlight. Sadly, sometimes things don't always work out. In round 12, we featured Piper versus Drew, who was at table 1. 2 great players playing unique decks. It seems like a slam dunk choice for the live stream, to be honest. We had not had a Reggie's deck on stream yet at that point in the tournament, so it seems like a slam dunk choice, and I don't think many people would question that decision. Round 13, we put on the Stone Journer, which is a unique deck. They were playing against Mew, Typalechia. So it was another Mew. I know we did see a lot of Mew, but there's a reason for it. It was very popular, and it was doing well, and a lot of good players were playing it as well. So all of these things lead to the deck seeing maybe a little bit more representation on the stream, which is just going to happen sometimes. So round 13, we put on Stone Journer. Round 14 was the round we were like, all right, number 1 choice, Jack. We're putting on the Miltank Morpeko deck. It's going on this round. And Jack got up paired. He got paired to Piper, and Piper was already locked for cut at that point. So she had the luxury of being able to just instantly concede to Jack to put him into cut to give him more match points, putting him to 34 match points because the matchup is so good for her. It is a really solid matchup. Jack's deck is an anti V Star V Max deck, and Piper plays none of those cards. So it was a very good matchup for Piper. She was confident in it, and so she said, I'm going to concede to you. I'm already locked for cut. Let me get you locked for cut so I have a chance to play against you, which ended up working out in her favor. And then, of course, in round 15, Jack ended up IDing because he was at 34 match points, IDs to 35. So no reason to play it out ever, right? So we didn't get to put him on in Swiss. We were like, okay, maybe in top 8, though, we'll get a matchup we can put him on. And he plays against Piper. And obviously, if Piper feels confident enough to scoop him into cut, it's probably not a matchup that we want to pick to put on the stream. And even if we had picked it to put on stream, something we also have to consider, especially in top cut, whenever we have extended time, is the potential for a lot of downtime between matches, which is what we always want to avoid. That's what gets people uninterested in sticking around and watching the stream. If we put on a match for top 8 that goes to it lasts for 45 minutes and the rest of the top 8 matches go for the full 75, that's going to be 30 minutes of downtime where there's not much for us to do. And we're going to lose a lot of people that way. So these are all things we're having to consider and juggle and bounce back and forth as to when we're choosing a match. And so that's why we ended up going with the match we did. Jeremy, who was the first seed coming into day 1, playing the Mew deck, which was the big story to me from the event, was, this new build of the deck being so popular and so powerful, and playing up against Ice Rider, a deck that we had not had on yet. So it was also a win there, getting to feature that deck, and it ended up being a pretty good game. And it did last pretty much the full 75 minutes.
Yeah, no, I mean, that all makes sense. Kind of unfortunate to not get the Miltank more Pico deck on the stream. But yeah, just kind of goes down that way. But there was a couple more events this weekend. We had the regional in Porto Algere. Did I get that right?
Algere.
Won by Dalton with an interesting Arceus deck, a very interesting Arceus deck, quad Arceus. Now, this is actually a deck, like, when we both saw this, we probably both thought the same thing. This is a deck that we both tried out when Arceus, like, first came out, right? Where it was just a 4/4 Arceus. I mean, that's basically it. Dalton did have a couple more interesting things in here. A Blissey V, a Slacking V, and Dunsparce is not a huge surprise because removing Fighting Weakness from Arceus is pretty good, but Slacking V and Blissey V were definitely a surprise to be included alongside just a 4/3 Arceus, and that's all the Pokemon in the deck. And then besides that, supporters, energies, other fun stuff. But basically just like a quad, almost quad. I guess there's only 3 Arceus. There's 2 ordinary rods, so we can get some more Arceus back. That 2 ordinary rod. Actually, that's, you could get back 3 Slackings. You could do Slacking 3 times. So that's probably the craziest deck to come out of this weekend besides the quad Miltank deck, to be honest. So shout out to Dalton for winning with it's just wild deck.
Definitely a unique one. Also another one that I feel a little sad that I won't get a chance to really like play it to its full capacity, because if I play it on the ladder, I'm going to be playing against Lost Zone box, which obviously this deck was not built with those type of things in mind because it wasn't in the format. But yeah, very cool deck. Very similar to the Quad Arceus decks that we have played before. Slacking V is a card that has kind of been on my radar ever since Pokemon Go came out, because it does a lot of damage, and it has a lot of HP too. 230 puts it out of range, makes it much more difficult to KO by a lot of things. It can't be KO'd by any cute, like, Arceus, Zigzagoon, Choice Belt plays, unless you, I guess, got a Scoop Up Net in there as well. It's harder for Palkia to KO, though, not that hard, but, a little harder. And especially when you throw a Cape of Toughness on it, it definitely makes it a little bit bigger, or even like a Tool Jammer as well would work. But Slacking, with the ability to just one-hit KO V-Stars with its heavy impact attack, if you throw Powerful Colorless Energy and Choice Belt on it, you can just do a ton of damage. Very cool deck. Definitely congratulations to Dalton on the finish.
Yeah, definitely for sure. And then the last event was the special event in Bilbao, won by Pierre, with the classic Mew VMAX Meloetta, not the DTE build. I think there was a DTE build in top 8. So Mew kind of getting its final say in one of the last major events of the format, and getting a dub there with the Meloetta build. And I think the the more surprising deck to me, and a deck that actually you predicted would potentially do well, was Stefan showed up with the Arceus Duraludon. And one thing we kind of talked about was like neither of us think like I don't think Arceus Duraludon's like that good of a deck. I don't think it's bad, but sometimes all any deck needs that is a solid tier one to tier three deck is just a really good player to pick it up and kind of push it to its limit. We saw, of course, Braden win Milwaukee Regionals in basically the same format before NAIC. Since then, Arceus Duraludon has kind of been down on the been on the down low. Yeah, but Stefan bringing it here to Bilbo to get the second place finish with it. But of course, Mew, especially with the Meloetta build, is pretty tough. I feel like for Duraludon, so not able to quite close it out. Yeah, Mew gets its final say, and Duraludon shows up as well at the end here.
And I do want to mention a couple things about the list here from Stefan. Very interesting. A couple texts to note. The Karen's Conviction, pretty cool supporter card. It's not like the craziest thing to see. I think we've seen it in Duraludon
Yeah.
a couple times here and there, but basically can just boost your damage in the late game so your Duraludon can one-hit KO a V-Star potentially. And then also Tower of Darkness being the stadium of choice as opposed to the tanky Crystal Cave, which is really what most people have gravitated toward, and also the trekking shoes in there as well. Just really focused on consistency.
Go fast.
So yeah, go fast for sure. So
Gotta
shout
find that
out to
Karen's Conviction.
Stefan, undoubtedly one of the best players in the game. Yeah, Arceus Duraludon, it's one of those decks that like the matchups on paper seem so good for it, but so many of the best players just don't like the deck, don't think it's great, recognize its weaknesses, and so gravitate away from it for those reasons. But Stefan was like, you know what? The matchups seem good. I'm going to play it. And he ended up getting second with it. Close to a win, not quite, but very well played, I'm sure. And congratulations to Stefan. I've not gone back and watched any of the streamed games yet from Bilbao, but we'll go back and check some of that out. Looking forward to watching how exactly the final shaped up.
Yeah, me either. I've only watched the finals of I only went back and we watched the finals of what's it called, Baltimore. Actually didn't even watch. I was there. I didn't watch any of that when I was done with day two.
What
I
the
kind of
heck,
left the
man?
venue.
We need to get people in the crowd. Come on, it's
I did.
exciting.
I did go back and rewatch the finals though. But yeah, that's gonna do it. Those are the last three major events in the format. And to kind of close out the format, and something we might do a little bit more routinely with the end of each format, just kind of like talk a couple points we might want to talk about. The main thing I wanted to talk about was just kind of Palkia and Mew in general, as being, Mew being by far the most powerful deck until we kind of got Palkia, and then we got Palkia. And I think Palkia and Teleon still is the best deck in the format. I think overall can kind of be tech for so many situations, and was overall, I think, underplayed here. I think you could make an argument that the Mew VMAX deck with the DTs could be the most powerful deck in the format. I know quite a few of the players who brought it to Baltimore think it is the best deck in the format by far. I do think the deck is very good. And it's cool to see Mew kind of show up in dominance again, at least at Baltimore. And it did win Bilbo, although Bilbo was the Meloetta build, but it'd be different. Not just like Meloetta Mew with catchers donking everyone and no one kind of having any fun. There's a lot more depth to the gameplay against the DTE build. I say a lot more. It's still Mew. It's got Echoing Horn and Cross Switcher, so it still does some gimmicky race stuff that you can't really keep up with. But it does feel it just feels more enjoyable to play against than the Meloetta build. I guess that's what I'll say. So I'm happy that ended up being the more dominant build, at least in Baltimore. So I wasn't playing against the Fusion Strike build. Every single Mew I went up against was not the Fusion Strike build. But yeah, I think those two decks are still kind of at the end of it all, those are still definitely the two best decks in the format. I think overall is Mew and Palkia. They're still the tier S at the end of it all, despite how the format has changed up to this point.
Yeah, Arc Beaverell definitely underperformed this weekend, but we can't totally count it out. Obviously, you won an AIC with it, though the format was slightly different. We didn't have Pokemon Go, but and then of course it won the World Championships by Andre Shkubal. So congratulations to all of the people who did well in this format. I think this format was overall pretty fun. I don't think it was like I think it was an improvement on the Brilliant Stars format in my mind. I enjoyed it a bit more, brought in some more variety. Though Brilliant Stars, like we saw variety, but it was all around Arceus. So it was like the same deck, but like a little different, but really the same. So yeah, I was definitely a fan of this format. And something I also wanted to chat about was kind of the question of like, is a format ever really solved? I think that's a discussion that comes up a lot. Like, oh, we figured the format out. This is the obvious best deck, and this is the best way to play it. And I think that's like proven that that's not really the case. We've got this new Mew build that has really just kind of come out in the last couple weeks at the end of the format here. Obviously got huge help from Pokemon Go. with Pokestop. I don't think this deck really functions at all without access to Pokestop. Like, Pokestop is super
Big
good.
deal, yeah.
Cool that, people found a good way to utilize that stadium, because I think everyone recognized how powerful it could be. And then also, like, there's always room for innovation, as we saw from Jack Moore making top 8 with a Miltank Morpeko deck, right?
Yeah, and then also the quad Arceus deck
Yes,
from
yes, can't forget
Dalton.
it.
And even Tord came out with a pretty cool Palkia deck, kind of like Palkia Ice Rider B Barrel, but there was no Ice Rider, it was just Palkia B Barrel. So yeah, I think it is hard for a format to truly be solved before the next set releases. Like, I'm sure you can get close sometimes, and I think sometimes the progression of a format is more so due to uh the lack of, or the how bored some of the top players are in the game, where it's like, I could play ADPization again, or I could play a deck that maybe 50/50s it and it's just different, right?
Sure.
There's something that's not ADPization but 50/50s ADPization. That's like the only reason that they end up playing not ADPization, right? So I think it is kind of, maybe depends on the format a little bit. And then also, like, how many tournaments are in the format as well. This format did not have that many tournaments, right?
Right.
It was just Worlds, right?
Yeah, Worlds, and then this weekend, pretty much. Yep.
Yeah, so that's another big thing, because I think that is the biggest catalyst for change in the format that makes people want to stop and think and try and come up with something new and different, is the next major tournament, right? So that's going to be a big difference. That's going to be a uh big impact on how fast a format evolves, or if it evolves at all. Will just be how many major tournaments do we have in it.
Well, it is time, Azul, to move on to everyone's favorite segment of the show, Guess That Flavor Text, where each week either Azul or myself picks a Pokemon card, reads the flavor text from it, and has the other host try to guess what Pokemon is featured on that card. You get 4 points. We have been keeping track, of course, over the last few episodes, or all of the episodes, of who has gotten more correct. I do believe we are still tied up at the moment, 3 points to 3 points, because we're both terrible at it. But if you get the flavor text correct without using any of your lifelines, you get 4 points, and for each of the 3 lifelines you use, you lose a point. So the 3 lifelines being what set the card is from, what stage the card is, and then have your opponent read an attack name. And I got to give a shout out for this choice to my friend I met this weekend, or saw this weekend, Naomi. Came up to me with her family, her brother and her parents, and gave me this card to try to guess the flavor text. I'll tell you afterwards if I got it correct or not whenever she quizzed me on it. But here we go. Let's get into it. Azul, are you ready?
I'm ready.
The gas made in its belly burns from its rear end. The fire burns weakly when it feels sick.
All right, go ahead. Read that to me one more time.
The gas made in its belly burns from its rear end. The fire burns weakly when it feels sick.
So, I mean, it's probably a fire type Pokemon. I mean, it's definitely, like, I initially I heard gas and I thought of coughing and wheezing, but I don't think it's coughing or wheezing. For some reason, I think it's Tepig, because no, wait, now I'm thinking it's Lechonk. I don't know why I think it's Lechonk though. It could be Lechonk, but we don't have a Lechonk, right?
Azul, it's
It's the
guess the
next set.
flavor text. We don't have a Lechonk card. What are you talking about?
Okay, that's what I was asking. I was like, do we have a Lechonk? I'm thinking
No.
about pigs. I'm thinking about gas. I'm thinking about farting. I'm stuck on pig Pokemon. I kind of want to go for the 4 points with Tepig, but I'm gonna try and be a little bit safer here. So I'm gonna go with, what stage is the card?
It is a basic.
All right, so asking what set the card is from won't help me at all. So I'm gonna go with an attack name.
Ember.
I'm gonna go with Tepig.
That is incorrect, Azul.
Oh my god.
I will read this, or say what the set
Set.
is for anyone who's trying to guess along at home, wants to use this last lifeline. The set is Steam Siege. There is no Tepig in Steam Siege. And the card is Chimchar. So
What?
a different basic fire Pokemon, a different starter fire. Don't worry, Azul. I also got it wrong when Naomi came up and quizzed me on it. I didn't
What'd you
realize
guess?
Chimchar, if you look at this card, Chimchar from Steam Siege, he does have fire on his butt. I didn't realize he had fire on his butt for some reason.
I don't think anyone thinks about Jim driving fire on his butt.
I
That's not like
know.
not something.
I guessed. I said that my thoughts initially went to Charmander. I was thinking back to um like the cartoon that we watched when we were kids, and Charmander's tail would always dim down whenever it wasn't feeling good or it was sad or it felt
Oh,
sick. So
yeah.
that's what made me that I went with I used one lifeline and said, what stage is the card? She told me it was a basic, so I said, you know what, I'm going with Charmander, and it was wrong. It is Chimchar. So shout outs once again to Naomi for the submission. Let us know down in the comments of the YouTube video. Did you get the guess that flavor text correct this week? Azul not getting on the board this time,
I was kinda
unfortunately.
feeling confident.
It's not a
Yeah, oh,
bad
well.
guess. It's not a bad guess. It's just a
Yeah. Fire
different first
Pokemon.
form fire starter.
Alright. Let's go ahead, wrap it up here in this episode. Last thing we're gonna talk about is Baltimore Regionals. That's what the original we were both at, and it definitely didn't go as smoothly as it could have. It could have been the same at the other major events. We don't know. We didn't participate in those. And there was definitely less talk on Twitter. But of course, when you have a regional with 1,000 players, I don't know how many participants were in the other two events, but
Around
there's more.
300 in Bilbao and 250-ish in Brazil.
Yeah, so when you have 1,000 player event, there's just more people who could be tweeting about it. So, yeah, there was definitely some issues. I mean, the first thing I guess to bring up here, we should talk about real quick, is there was no bag checks, which is definitely a little bit off-putting compared to. I mean, every other event I think has had bag checks.
Yeah, and I saw a couple people talking about this on Twitter in my replies about how they felt a little unsure about that, and it's just a minor thing. It seems like that if something went wrong would have become a major thing,
Yeah,
and it's not out of the realm of possibility for some incident to have occurred. Now, I will say I have always felt extremely safe at every single Pokemon tournament that I've been to.
yep.
The staff and the Pokemon Company do a great job with these events. And I don't know where the disconnect was here. Is it an organizer thing? Was it a venue thing where things just weren't lined up and checked? There were event or venue staff like sitting at the door as you walked in, and I kind of like walked in the first time. I was like, oh, do we need to I need to show you my bag or like what? And it's like, we're good, go on. So I was like, yeah, it's definitely abnormal to what I would say we are used to.
Yeah, definitely different. I definitely feel like, for me, like I mean, it's always the convention center staff that does the bag checks. It's not judges, right?
Right, yes.
So the only thing I could think about is like maybe in Baltimore it's just not law to do bag checks for events, but I don't know if it is at any of the other places, or whenever there's been other things happening, next to a Pokemon regional at a convention. It doesn't seem like bag checks are always happening at other events either. So it seems like it was being asked by Pokemon to tell the convention center that they would like bag checks done, and then the convention center staff is the ones who do the bag checks, right? So I don't know, or what did Overload just not ask for bag checks to happen? Did they not even attempt to try and have bag checks done? Who knows? I guess we could see, maybe we'll see some consistency from the next Overload event, right? If there's no bag checks again, maybe we can try, and there's bag checks at the other events, maybe we can try and just draw a conclusion there, right?
Yeah,
Or
I would say
maybe they'll say something. Who knows?
it was maybe like an unfortunate oversight, or like just maybe a miscommunication happened
Yeah.
somewhere. There's so many moving parts when it comes to running events. Like, I do not or envy a tournament organizer's job at all. There is so much to go into, and it is really a thankless job because people are very critical, and sometimes rightfully so, and we are going to be talking about that here soon, because there's definitely plenty of issues that I think deserve criticism. But running an event is difficult. Let's not get it out.
Yeah.
Let's not forget, and there is always, of course, a human behind every bit of criticism, so always keep that in mind when you're providing feedback to something. And to me, really, one of the biggest issues at the event was not something that affected me personally, as I was not a competitor, but I do think it is a massive deal, and that is the fact that players who registered for this event on Overload's website, it says that they would receive a $20 Ultra Pro coupon with their registration. And when you went to pick your bag up, that's not what you got. You got a 15% off Ultra Pro coupon. And that is a big difference. There's a big
Yeah.
difference between getting like a nice little $20 rebate, go get yourself a deck box and some sleeves, and then now it's a coupon that you have to spend additional money to actually get any value from.
Yeah, and especially if you're someone who uses Ultra Pro products, right? Like you're just gonna go get sleeves for your next couple of regionals or whatever. And that was definitely. I mean, I felt like that was a pretty big deal. I think overall the community seemed to be pretty upset about it. Overall, and I think it's like the first time there's ever been kind of and I think this does tie in a little bit to the entry fee being so high. It's like, okay, when entry fees were $40, $50, it was like people were like, oh, I'm just like comfortable with spending that much money at a to play at the event. I'll get my swag. If I forget to get my swag, I don't care as much. But now that it's $70 and people are actually stopping and thinking and being like, okay, what am I getting in return for this $70? Right? I think it's like the first time anyone's ever asked that question about entry fee for a Pokemon tournament. Just what am I get? I'm giving you this much. What am I getting in return? Right? Trade offer. $70 regional fee, $20 Ultra Pro coupon, except there was no $20 Ultra Pro coupon when the trade offer went down. And that wasn't, they ran out of playmats, they ran out of promos, seemingly way earlier, or just in general. I don't even know how, I don't know if I've ever heard of them running out of promos before. And I usually pick up my swag really late at most regionals. And I've always walked away with my swag when I remember to get it. This time around, I remembered late, and me being late is a fine reason for me to have not gotten my swag, to be honest. But the reason was they just didn't have any. They were all out. And when you're paying $70, and I know even on the site it says, while supplies last, but I think there should be when we're paying $70 for entry fees, I think there should be a pretty big effort to supply that demand, right? There should be an effort to do it, right?
Yeah.
And from what I've seen so far as far as answers to the situation, well, just show up earlier, right? But when there's like an outcry, like when there's a noticeable negative response to this situation, if the responses will show up earlier, what's going to happen is after a couple of events of show up earlier, everyone is going to go get swag immediately when they show up to the event hall. And that will lead to people within the first hour of the event being open not being able to get swag because they ran out, right? The swag will just be gone within the first couple hours because everyone will immediately go to get swag. And I'm sure the event staff doesn't want that to happen. I'm sure it's way nicer and easier for people to come and go and get their swag from the event staff throughout a day instead of people lining up immediately, like a huge line to go get their swag, right? So I don't think that's a good or reasonable answer is just show up earlier. Because if that happens, 3 or 4 events in a row, more and more people will immediately go to the event hall and go over to the swag, right? And then the swag will be all gone in the first 2 hours of the event starting. And what's going to happen is like round 1 is going to start before people could get their swag anyway. And now it's going to be a race to finish round 1 to run over to the swag desk and go get your swag, right? It's going to be like, well, I don't know if I'm going to win this game 3. I'll concede. I'm going to go get my swag. It's like, I don't think I'm going to win this. I may as well get swag confirmed, right?
I don't remember where it was. I did see a Twitter reply somewhere in the discussion happening around this week where someone said that they had to get out of line to go pick up their swag because round 1 was starting. They went to go play their game. After round 1, they went to pick up their swag. They were out of the playmats.
I don't think they were out that early. So they had to have gone back a little bit later. I don't think they were out after like round 1.
That might be a little bit of exaggeration then. From that
I think I didn't know about mats, but I think they had promos as late as Sunday. So they definitely had promos. They maybe didn't have mats. So the mats maybe went fast. That could have been the one thing. But I think it shouldn't be a thing of like TO's response to this should not be you better show up earlier. There should definitely be like sometimes that we might not have enough, right? That's fine. But I think there should be an effort from the TOs to try and match the number of playmats and promos, especially promos. Like the little packets they get have like I don't know how many they have. 50. Let's just say 50.
Yeah.
And it's like this big. Like the thing is like this big. Just get 10 more of those, right? It's a box. Like go order 10 more of those things. Get a surplus of them. I feel like every event should end with extra swag that you end up just giving to staff anyways or something like that. It's such a minor cost, right? To end the tournament with plus 50 playmats and promo codes.
And as far as I understand it, it is on the organizer to order the playmats. Now they do have to pay for them. They have to buy them. But they order them from Pokemon, and I'm sure it is at some. I don't know how much they cost per mat. I'm sure it is at a reduced cost to what you would imagine, like usually a playmat. I think if you sell a playmat in a store, $20 is probably like the price that you would see most of the time. I can't imagine they're paying $20 per playmat to get
No,
these
no
things.
way.
No shot, right?
Maybe
Um,
5, maybe less.
I don't want to put a number on it because I don't know. But
Yeah.
it is up to the TO to order a certain number of things. And I understand not wanting to order more, but ordering less is unacceptable to me, honestly. I think you have to order with the mindset of, I've got this many spots. I need to make sure I have this many things. And honestly, swag pickup and check in should just be the same location. When you
Yeah.
check in for the tournament, you should be given your swag. That is the easiest solution, because then you're knocking out, you're having to use half of the amount of staff, right? Because you're having half of them check you in and half of them do, or you're having, like, 10 people do check in, 10 people do swag pickup. Now you can just have 10 people do both of the things in one location, or 15 people do both of the things in one location, maybe, right?
Yeah.
So it would just make so much sense to me. I understand that on their website it does have the clause of, products listed above are available while supplies last. And sure, that legally, I guess, excludes them from the fact that they did not provide the playmat and promo to every single person because they ran out. But they shouldn't have run out. It's not. They need to make sure that there is enough ordered to at least supply the majority of the players. And it may still have been a majority, but and I don't think this is the first time as well that a playmat for the event has,
That
um
happens often.
yeah, that they've run out of the playmats before. Like, this is not uncommon. And I think most people who didn't get the Giratina playmat got the choice to get either a hat or another older playmat, which, I think is an acceptable solution in the instance of running out of stuff. But to me, the real inexcusable thing is the Ultra Pro issue, because people think they're getting this $20 rebate when they register, and they're not. And also this, and I can't put the entirety of the blame on Overload for this. I have to imagine there was some miscommunication somewhere along the way between the organizer and Ultra Pro. Now, as to whose fault it was and where, we are unsure. I will say Overload did release a statement this evening, after this, kind of big response and, issue brought to their attention by everyone. And I'll just read their post on Twitter here. They wrote, "Good evening, everyone. We are settling in from a long and wonderful weekend. We are aware that this weekend had its hiccups." And I think that's fair. Every event is going to have some hiccups somewhere along the way, right? As for the Ultra Pro coupons, we were told we would receive $20 off coupons. With time constraints of planning a majority of this event in 4 weeks, we had the coupons shipped directly to the venue. We were made aware of the mistake around noon on Friday and are currently trying to resolve the issue. We know this isn't perfect, but hopefully we will have information soon. Thank you for your patience. So, and they did respond pretty quickly, responding on Monday to the issue. I think, that's good on them. I think that's all anyone can really ask for at this point. I would say, I hope people don't feel like Overload is like trying to pull one over on the community. I don't think that is the case. But promising one thing and delivering another without any, resolution is not acceptable in my mind.
Yeah, it definitely feels bad. I think the whole combination of it feels pretty bad. I think giving out swag, and when they're giving out swag at the beginning of the event, that means they have enough swag for everyone. Like I said, like it feels like those kind of things when you have 600 player to 1,000 player tournaments, like you should just end up with extra swag at the end of it all. That shouldn't be like a thing that happens. And now with this one, like it was kind of the same thing that happened with registration last season. Was it like that first event happened? And it's like, oh wait, the registration just filled up immediately. That's happening. And then it was kind of a catalyst to every event after that registration filled up super fast, right?
Yeah.
The same thing's gonna happen with swag pickup now. So if there was like, let's say, I don't know, 17% of people didn't pick up swag at events before, now it's only gonna be 10%, right? I'm gonna go get my swag immediately, knowing that if there's a possibility I'm not gonna get my swag, if I don't go to the swag desk immediately to get my swag, I'm gonna go as soon as I enter the hall, right? And I'm sure a lot of people are gonna do the exact same thing, right?
Yeah.
So once again, it'd just be best if you just get your swag. If you just get your swag as you go into the venue, it makes the most sense. They should order enough swag for everyone. There was one tweet that I wanted to uh, Dana Perrault tweeted, which I think is like a pretty reasonable solution as well. I'd say sell entries at regular price until you hit your swag count, then discount registration to reflect a no swag entry. Players are informed up front they will not receive swag and are compensated for the lack of it. I think that is also a reasonable solution. Like if you order 1,000 playmats and 1,000 uh,
Promos.
promos, then once you hit 1,001 people, they just, if they want to play in the tournament, they're aware they're paying less and they don't get the swag, right? I think that's actually like a reasonable solution as well. I think the best solution is to make it as uncomplicated as possible. Is just order enough swag, and then give it to people as they come through for registration. Because it's going to be getting close to 100% of people now because of this one kind of backlash, or the one kind of hiccup, I guess, whatever you want to call it, at this tournament. Because of the hiccup at this tournament, there's going to be more people are going to be trying to make sure they get their swag, right? Especially knowing that they might not be able to get, even if you're someone who always eventually got your swag on Sunday. A lot of people are just going to be going on Saturday now because they don't want to not be able to get the mat or get the Colors promo, or even could you get swag on Friday? I don't even know. I've never gone on Friday to get my swag.
You can't. You could have, yes, I believe.
Okay, so people are going to be going on Friday now too. Like everyone's going to be trying to go there as soon as possible because there's one hiccup. It's just going to lead to kind of like a catalyst of where people are going to be more aggressive about doing it. Same thing with registration. Registration's filling up last season.
And sadly, this was really not the only issue at the event. It's definitely the main thing that most people are talking about, but there was definitely plenty of delays that happened throughout the event. Now, we're not scheduled, we don't stream the first couple of rounds of regionals usually, which is not my decision, but that is, it's just what it is. It's how it is,
Yep.
and probably how it's going to be, to be honest. So I'm not always there first thing in the morning for round one to start. But from what I understand, what I saw on Twitter, the tournament was meant to start at 8:30 and did not get going until 9:15. Now, I'd say some reasonable, like some delays are like expected, right? There's a lot of people at these tournaments. It's a lot to juggle. I will also say we should have maybe mentioned this earlier on. Christine, who is like the tournament organizer here from Overload Events, she's also the organizer for Dallas Regionals in the past. And I think for Azul and I both, the last several Dallas Regionals have been some of the best run tournaments that we've been to. So she has a track record of running a really tight ship and running a really good regional championships. Now, she did not run any regionals last year. Ran Dallas in 2020 and had nothing since then. So I don't know if this was maybe a getting back into the swing of things type of event. I would imagine that has something to do with it. Or if there's just, there's just so many things, that can possibly go wrong and slow things down at these events. You're having to coordinate with so many different teams of people. So it's, I think, understandable for there to be some delays, but it wasn't just the start of the day. It seemed like between rounds, things started getting slow. We were always waiting between rounds for the next round to go up. Definitely longer delays than normal. And it feels like most regionals these days end at or before 9 p.m. Eastern time, or like, I guess not Eastern time, local time, I should say, end at 9 p.m. This tournament's round 9 did not conclude until 10:30.
Yeah. It was kind of unfortunate. So we're almost getting back to the old days of like ending. I remember Philly regionals. We got kicked out of the main hall, and they had to like announce the final standings outside the main hall.
I remember that.
Yeah,
oh my
it was
gosh.
like 1 a.m. or something.
Yeah.
It was like 12
it was
or 1
after
a.m.
midnight. Yeah.
Yeah. Everyone was kicked out of the main hall. We were outside of the main hall in like the, I don't know, what lobby-ish area, whatever you want to call it. It wasn't the lobby, but it was top of the escalators, hallway area.
Atrium.
Someone was standing up on a table with the final standings, and they were calling out names of who made cut. I think because that's back when it wasn't 621 made cut. It was like top 32 made cut. So it was just hopefully we don't slip too far back. I think maybe the delay was the venue was just the hall we were in was just it was bad, to be honest. You had to go down to 2 escalators, single file. And that's probably why it was delayed. You're trying to get 1,200 people or more into that room, into the hall single file, right? We were only going down one. There was one escalator you could go down, and people saw a ton of people had to check in. I had to check in on Saturday. So and then it was a single file down one escalator to get into the hall once you get your wristband. So I think it was just delayed. That was probably the reason it was delayed. It didn't seem like a lot of people checked in on Friday. I usually try and check in on Friday, but got in late on this one. So I think that was maybe the reason for the initial delay. But yeah, then the rounds were taken. It was taking a while in between the rounds, to be honest. And I didn't really notice the initial delay, and I didn't notice I was playing MUTV Union, so all my rounds went to time. So I didn't notice much of the delays because it felt normal. It felt like a normal amount of time in between rounds because I usually finish some of my rounds really early, and then I have like sometimes I'm sitting there for like 40 minutes before the next round goes up, right? But this time it was still only 10 or 20 minutes each time, but that's when I was going to time every single round. So there definitely was quite a bit of time in between rounds and quite a bit of time to get that first round going. And also, like I said, it was like it was to get down there, it was like one set of stairs for two escalators, one set of stairs for two escalators, one up, one down. So to get down to the hall was weird. It was kind of cramped. There wasn't a lot of like ways to get down there. And also in the hall itself, it was fine size, but it was down two flights of stairs, like in the basement hall or whatever you want to call it. It was just hot, man. It was just hot in there.
It was very hot,
It was
especially
not
sitting behind a
great.
desk with a jacket on with a bunch of really bright lights shining on you. It was very, very hot.
Yeah,
And you mentioned as
they
well,
should.
whenever you went up on the stage, right, for your streamed
Oh
match,
yeah.
it got really hot up there, right?
I should never run a tournament in that venue if they're going to be in that hall. I don't know if there was another hall big enough. There was definitely other halls at the venue. They should not ever run a regional championship in that venue if it's going to be in that hall. If it's a hall not in the basement with better ventilation, go for it, but not that one.
Yeah, definitely fair share of issues with the logistics there, and it ended up getting the stream to be delayed a little bit as well. Our plan was to what we've done at the last several regionals, and the schedule does get adjusted on the fly as it needs to for the stream, with what's happening in the tournament most of the time. Um, but we were supposed to start with round 4, and we were going to stream 2 round 4 matches because that's when the lunch break was going to be, and that's normally what
Mhm.
we've done, right? We pull one round 4 match, and stream it with everyone else playing round 4, and then we have another round 4 match. We tell those players to go get their lunch, they come back, and then as soon as the first round 4 match is done, we put the second one on, get them ready to go, and then they play while everyone else in the tournament is having lunch break, and then we just keep going with round 5. So that's kind of what the process has been for the last several regionals this season. However, for this tournament, because things started getting delayed, we were like, okay, well, we are going to have to probably just start with round 3, and we're going to start with round 3 during the players' lunch break. So we picked a round 3 match, sent them to go eat during the round, and then brought them back before the round had even ended totally. And they sat, played, did their game, and then eventually round 4 goes up. And, everything's going along there, but, a couple delays, things start happening, and it gets later in the evening, and it becomes evident about halfway through the stream we are not going to be able to stream round 9 of the event because there's a time set in place, a cutoff of when they need to be done. There's a lot of different factors there. I don't make any of those decisions, and I don't even know the details behind many of those decisions. I just show up and talk when they tell me to. That is the extent of my role for the most part, um, and provide feedback. That is the extent of what I do. Is I show up, I talk, and then I provide feedback to the production team where I can. So yeah, it's a big bummer. We didn't get to see the winning in round 9, and those are the most exciting moments to me on the stream.
Yeah.
People who are playing, they're winning in today too. They're winning into Top Cut, because that's when the most is on the line, and we just didn't get to see it.
Yeah, it definitely sucks. Definitely want to try and stream as much as possible. And there was such a good track record of it for the last couple events doing that lunch break round.
Yes, it's been a good
Which was like,
system for the last several regionals, without a doubt.
yeah, so that's kind of unfortunate. And so, yeah, not the smoothest event, I think, for sure. And then there was some other stuff that went down that made it a not so smooth event as well. And one of the things I guess we wanted to touch on a little bit was there was a couple gameplay errors on stream, right? So of course the first line of line of defense to prevent from gameplay errors is the players themselves, right?
It is
And especially
ultimately on the player, right?
yeah, of course, right? And generally, there's not a judge per match at a Pokemon tournament, right? But on stream, there is at least one judge for each stream match, sometimes two. And day one, they only did have one judge for the stream. Day two, I think they did have two. So there's a second line of defense consistently for any match that is on the stream. And there's even a third and fourth line of defense being the crowd and the casters. So there's a lot of eyes on it. Of course, you don't want to like the crowd and the casters should never be really put in the position to be the ones to intervene in a game, right? If they can catch something and get it across in time, that's great. But it's not going to be like it's not on them, right? And a lot of people, there's always consistently been a lot of talk about judges in Pokemon, right? Are they doing enough? Um, the one thing I always hear is like we need better judges, but like I don't think people understand the judges in Pokemon are volunteering. So how are you gonna find new people to volunteer at a Pokemon competition event? Like where are you finding these people? The people who want better judges, where are you finding? Now I think if the judges were being compensated in a way that made it more reasonable for them to be spending their time judging, I think they could be held to a higher standard. But I think the way judges are currently compensated to volunteer to judge at Pokemon tournaments, I think this is what we have, and I think this is just kind of fun. You can't really put anything on the judges. I think for the current system that's out there, would I like this system to be better? Yes, but it's not. It's what we currently have. The only thing you can really do is put your best judges, on the stream matches, right? That's the only thing you could theoretically do, right?
Yeah, and I understand the idea of not wanting to put the best judges, especially in day one, on your stream matches because that means their attention has to be focused entirely on one match. Whereas if they're out in the field, they're able to keep their eye on dozens of matches
Yeah,
theoretically and can
or
answer
assist with any
questions
ruling.
from dozens of players theoretically because there's lots,
Yeah,
plenty of judge calls that happen every single round. They can run over and resolve things very quickly. And I also don't want to be too harsh on the people who were on stream as the judges. I do think there was several people who it was their first time being a judge on stream. I don't think it was their first time being a judge at all, but first time like on the actual stream, which does add another element. They're having, the headset on, they're having to deal with the Discord to like communicate and stuff like that with the production team. So there's all kinds of elements going on.
yeah.
Um, and I understand what you're saying, Azul, about like I mean they definitely are not paid adequately for they are volunteering, right? So they're not like
Yes, it
paid
is a
anything
volunteer
realistically. They're
position.
they're coming away from the weekend with a couple booster boxes usually as their compensation and a staff promo, staff playmat maybe. Um as their compensation for their work. I do think, however, whenever they have so much authority over the players, right? Whenever they can make rulings that affect the game. Now, this is not about anything that happened or anything, but I do think like when you have that authority, there is some standard that certainly needs to be held.
Yeah, I think that is fair, and maybe that's what happens, right? They don't do a good job on the stream. It's like, okay, you're not gonna be able to become a stream. You're not gonna be able to do the stream judge job again, for a couple events or
And
a
even the
couple
best
events, right?
stream
Like,
judges, even the people who do it regularly for us that I see up there all the time, they had to do it the first time at some point, right?
yeah, exactly. Yeah. So everyone has to have their first initial chance to do it. Um, and yeah, there's gonna be a mistake. Even if you took the top two judges in the game and put them up there, and there usually is two stream judges, something could still happen, right? So it's never going to be perfect. We all want it to be better. I think it's unfair the thing I guess I always say is we need judges to be better or better judges. Like that's just not a thing unless you're going to make a bunch of people appear. No one like there's not enough people competing to judge at Pokemon events. I don't think to make that statement. It's just not a statement that is fair to make because I don't think there's that many people competing to be judges at these regionals. I think there is that many judges competing to be judges at international championships and at worlds, but that's a different discussion, right? And I feel like we do actually see these issues come up less at the bigger tournaments, and that is
Yes.
because generally the majority of the judges are of a higher quality, right? They're taking the best judges from around the world, putting them all together for the international events and the world championships, right? So you're gonna end up with a higher quality judge across the board. But for the regionals, there's not 500 people trying to fill 100 positions, right? It's just not a
Yeah.
thing.
So there were three issues that came up on the stream, as far as I remember, as far as judge calls that were potentially missed, where things could have been prevented. Once again, ultimately, these things come down to the player. It is up to the player to keep the game state first and foremost. The judge is just there to kind of also be another layer to that, another line of defense, as you said. So three issues. One of them was Grant Shin playing a double supporter in a turn. They were playing Mew VMAX. Turns go really long. The supporter was a double tails on Silene, so it's easy to think back on your turn and be like, I've done nothing this turn because you flip double tails on your Silene. So yeah, I can totally play this boss. Didn't happen. Um, and also, before we go any further, I do want to disclaimer throw out there. I am not in any way trying to claim that anyone did or did not cheat, did or did not make a gameplay error. I mean, they did make at minimum a gameplay
Yeah.
error, right? But there is, and I see this in the chat all the time, there is a difference between cheating and making a gameplay error. Cheating comes with intent. It is very difficult, if not impossible, to prove intent. Definitely impossible in any of these scenarios that we're going to be talking about today, the three things that happen. So the first issue was or one of the issues was with Grant Shin. Another one in day two was actually in top eight, was with Jeremy Gamilla, who attached two energies in the turn. Once again, Mew VMAX, long turns. Attach before supporter, play supporter, fusion strike system. Have I attached? I don't think so. Boom, attach, knockout. It was like one of those type of things.
Yeah.
And then the third and final issue, which was actually the first one that came up on the stream, was, and definitely the one that has had the most discussion, without a doubt, because of the caliber of players involved in this instance, was Isaiah Bradner versus Xander Perrault in round number 4, where Isaiah seemingly, and not seemingly, he did take 2 item cards off of Irida. Now, Irida, of course, the supporter card. We've seen it plenty of times from these from these Palkia decks to grab a water Pokemon and an item card from your deck. The situation here, 3.5 minutes left. Isaiah's trying to play quickly to make sure that this game can finish because they are tied 1-1 in the set. Isaiah's definitely in the better position, so he wants this game to finish. He wants to come away with a win here. He plays his Drizzile. He goes into the deck, grabs Irida, and grabs 2 item cards out of the deck with it. And then Xander catches it. And I was actually casting this match, and I noticed it as well. And I said, he can't do that. He can't do that. This is a mistake that could happen, because your Irida is going to get a Drizzile, which is going to get you another item anyway. So he's like maybe just skipping one step ahead in his process, right? So
Yeah.
it's a reasonable mistake to have made. Xander said, wait a second, you got 2 item cards. What's up with that? And this is really where the issue comes in, because Isaiah puts the 2 item cards in hand. Xander stops him, and then Isaiah shows, no, I got a Palkia V-Star and an item card. And that, to me, is where a lot of questioning has come into this, because Isaiah is claiming he got 2 cards that he did not get off of his Irida.
After getting 2 cards he couldn't get.
Yes, after getting 2 cards he couldn't get. And his opponent stopped and questioned him about it.
Yeah. Yeah, of course.
Now, I will say, I think it is very unlikely that this was intentional and cheating from Isaiah, because people who cheat are generally pretty smart about cheating, and cheating on stream just seems so dumb. But it is, once again, it is impossible to prove intent. And you never know when someone could be trying to get away with something or whatever. And I will say, this is not too dissimilar from a situation that we talked about on the podcast in the last season, where a player in a Brazilian regionals was counting out their cards from Malamar for Rapid Strike Tentacles, dealing 40 damage for each Rapid Strike card, and tried to hide a Drizzile in there as a Rapid Strike Pokemon. It's really not that dissimilar from this situation, where it's like quick flashes of cards, boom, 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 we're flying, we're going through things. That player got disqualified from that tournament in Brazil. And once again, it is impossible. It's very hard, if not impossible, to prove intent here. I don't think it would have been unreasonable for Isaiah to have been disqualified from the event for this. I do think a penalty was issued going into the next round after it got caught. Um, and once again, I'm not saying one way or the other whether I think they are cheating, but I mean, if we're talking about consistency across events, obviously these events took place with two different regions of the world, two different tournament organizers, two different head judges
Judges, yeah.
making those decisions. So the consistency there is going to be a little questionable. I think obviously things got assessed and looked at. Isaiah was given a penalty going into the next round, but I don't think a disqualification would have been an unreasonable result.
Yeah, I think I agree. And this game finished, right? They didn't try and
No,
resolve
it
it.
did. It did come out as a tie.
Yeah, okay. Like the match finished before.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. They didn't. Yeah, okay. Yeah, I mean, I think. Yeah, I agree. I think whether Bradner did it on purpose or not, they obviously don't think Bradner did it on purpose, because if they thought that, definitely would have been DQ'd, even
Yeah.
possibly banned, right?
Well,
Um,
will they?
but
People
that's
aren't
true.
getting banned
Def-
these
it
days, so
definitely would. I think if they thought that's true, I think probably would have been DQ'd. But I think just on the principle of the situation, especially when you compare it, and I think this is something we can look at, comparing it to something like Jeremy's situation or Grant Shen's. This one is a lot harder to recognize as a kind of, and it's kind of like, well, what can you say is a normal mistake in Pokemon? Well, it would be something that comes up more consistently and seems to not be a mistake created by malicious intent, like double attach, like double supporter. Those things happen all the time and are mistakes all the time. Sure, I'm sure someone has double supported out there or double attached out there maliciously, right? Yes, that has happened, sure. But it doesn't happen as much as it happens by mistake, right? But this thing with Isaiah, so many more things happened, and there was seemingly a possibility for Bradner to have attempted to deceive Xander and the judges when he showed the Palkia and the item card, right? If Bradner had just been like, I took quick ball cross switcher, Xander would have been like, you can't do that, and Bradner would have been like, oh, you're right, and then they probably would have been able to resolve it with zero penalties or zero questions about anything. But because of showing the Palkia and the cross switcher, I think that is enough right there to be like, listen, Bradner, we don't think you cheated. That the judge could even be like, we don't think you cheated, but based on the principle of the thing and what actually happened, we do have to disqualify you from this tournament.
yeah.
And I don't think that would lead from a ban there afterwards, anyways. But I do actually think, like, having seen it, thought about it myself personally, I think this definitely probably should have resulted in a disqualification for Bradner because of what we've seen leading to disqualifications in past tournaments.
Yeah, this is not, like I mentioned, dissimilar from the Rapid Strike Tentacles instance. That player got disqualified. I think consistency is only fair in these type of situations, right? And it is very similar to that one. Um, and this is something I noticed because I was casting this game. I instantly noticed, yeah, you can't take two item cards with Irida. But then whenever Xander questioned it and Isaiah showed the Palkia and the cross switcher, like just in the like, I'm not rewinding the thing to watch it back, right? I'm watching the game as it plays out, trying to talk
Yeah.
about it. It made me question myself. It made me question, did I miss something? Like, because like the players are usually the ones who are the most into what's happening. I was like, did I miss
Yeah.
a Drizzile? Maybe he played an Evolution Incense in there and was doing things all together. So it made me question it, and that's why maybe it didn't get as escalated as quickly as it could have. But you know, it's on the players. Xander did catch it, but it didn't get escalated past that point. Maybe the judge should have noticed as well. You know, it is what it is. Unfortunate that it happened, but here we are. You know, here we are.
Yeah, just unfortunate. I mean, I think overall, like the number one thing to always like remind yourself as any player of any skill level, just try and take your time, make sure what you're doing is you're not only trying to you're not only trying to make the best play you can make on your turn, but actually make a play you're legally allowed to make on your turn, right?
Yeah.
Because even if you don't mean to do it, it still can happen, and it will happen, right? That's another thing. It's probably going to happen. I'll probably mess up at some point. You're going to mess up at some point. Well, not you, but the viewers out there. But try and play as a as fair as you can. Don't make the mistakes. Don't double support it. Don't double attach. Don't irrita for 2 item cards. Just try and make sure you're doing the actions as you should. Yeah.
And with all those things being said, I think that will do it for our episode this week. Another long one, but we really do appreciate everyone sticking with us. And thanks, as always, for all the support. And if you do enjoy the cast, please be sure to leave a rating. It's free, it's fast, and it is the easiest way to show your support. You can also subscribe to us over here on the YouTube channel and leave a like on the video if you do enjoy it. And if you want to stay connected with us, the best way to do that is on social media, on Twitter. You can find myself at Trainer Chip. Azul is at Azul_GG. And you can also follow the podcast at Uncommon_Energy.
Yeah, appreciate the support as always, everyone. Peoria Regionals coming up in a couple weeks, so we'll be seeing what Lost Origins can do soon. I'm super excited. Lost Origin can do soon. I'm super excited for that. And we'll be coming at you with a new episode next Tuesday at 7 a.m. Eastern. Catch you all next week. Peace.